بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي إليه مسائر الخلق وواقب الأمر. نحمده على عظيم إحسانه ونير برهان ونوامر فضل امتنان. حمدا يكون لحقه كذا ولشكره أداء وإلى صوابه موجبا ولحسن مزيده مقربا. الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين راحة للعاشقين والمراد المشتاقين شمس العارفين والسراج الصالحين نبيه مصباح والعلم صاحب الجود والكرم والله حافظه وجبرائيل خادمه والبراق مرقمه سدرة المنتهى مقامه كعب قوسين محبوب رب المشرقين والمغربين جد الحسن والحسين مولانا ومولاي الثقلين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
ثم الصلاة والسلام على جميع أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين المنتخبين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
ولعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم منكر فضائلهم غاصب حقوقهم ومراتبهم ومنزلتهم من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في قرآنه الكريم وهو أصدق القائلين قوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإن يهلكون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So over the course of this Ashra, these first 10 days of Muharram, we're looking at the digital deed. How to hold on to our faith in this completely unprecedented, completely new time, which is all about the digital world. And for most of you, when I say unprecedented and new, it's not really that, because it's what you've grown up with. It's what you know and it's what you've always known. But for a lot of people who are a little bit older, they look at it and it's a completely new world, the digital world. Everything is so much faster, everything is so much newer, everything is beyond what they imagined. You see all these old movies like Back to the Future and things like that, and they try to predict in some way what the future would look like, and they saw flying cars and things like that. They saw people teleporting and things like that. It's not really the case, but technology is developing so quickly that we as people are struggling to keep up with it sometimes. Our minds are struggling to keep up with it, and we looked at that kind of stuff yesterday, about how technology is changing so quickly and so fast, and in ways that we couldn't predict before and we couldn't imagine before, to the point where now our minds are struggling to keep up with the effects, and we're not even realizing the effects that this new technology has on us. And today we're looking at something very specific. We're looking at the religious risk involved in all this new technology, and specifically with your socials, your Insta, your TikTok, your Snap, your Twitter, whatever. We're looking at the risk involved with those, the religious risk. But when I say religious risk, and we touched on this yesterday at the start, what kind of risk are we talking about? What is religious risk? There's two things that you might understand from that. One is a risk to Islam, a risk to the religion itself. But see, we can't pose a threat to Islam. Islam has reached a point now where, and I'm not speaking just because Allah Azza wa Jal has promised that Islam will be protected till the end of time. That's there and that's true. But if you look at it purely from a knowledge point of view, purely from the point of view of what we see in the world around us, you can't obliterate Islam. Why? Because Islam is so far widespread that it would be impossible to get rid of it. First, you'd have to get rid of every Quran, and that's what people have tried to do in the past. They thought, let's get rid of the Quran so that people don't learn about Islam, but they fail to realize that people have memorized the Quran. You have people who are Hafiz al-Quran. And then you have the Ahlul Bayt, the A'immah, the Ahadith, their teachings. People have remembered those, the scholars that we have, our ulama. So if you want to get rid of Islam, first you have to get rid of all the Qur'ans, and once you've done that, then you have to get rid of everyone or silence everybody who's ever learnt the Qur'an, and then you have to get rid of the people who teach about Islam and the people who know about the teachings of Islam, and even then you still have all the Muslims who have learned from those people. People like me and you who come to these majalis and we learn about Islam. See, it's impossible to get rid of the religion of Islam. It's impossible to do that. But what can be done, and again, it's what we spoke about yesterday at the start of the lecture, what can be done is you can take Islam away from people. You can take Islam from the individual person. You can't remove Islam altogether, but you can attack the individual Muslims. And that's what's happening. And we're not realizing it. These socials that we use, they have these threats, they have these dangers, and we don't understand what they are, we don't notice what they are until it's far too late. Until we reach a point where we actually can't stop it, we actually can't go back on what's already happened. And there's different ways to try and take Islam away from somebody. You can try and threaten them, you can try and scare them. But even still, if you threaten somebody, then Islam still remains in their heart. You have to take it away from their heart. You can try and convince them that Islam doesn't work, that it doesn't make sense, that it's not right. And how would you do that? You change the entire world around them to be conflicting with Islam. That's a lot like the world we're living in right now. It's a lot like what we've got at the moment. A lot of what we look at, we see what's going on in the world and we turn around and look at Islam and think, that doesn't quite match up. Things that in the world are perfectly okay, they're perfectly allowed and in some instances encouraged, and we can't see any reason why not. Why can't that be allowed? But Islam says, no, you can't do that. One of the biggest examples is music. A lot of people think, why can't I listen to music? What's the issue with music? And Islam says, no, you can't do that. When you surround people with things that are seemingly harmless, but that oppose what Islam says, all of a sudden you make them question, you force them to question, is Islam right or wrong? But see, here's the thing. Islam wants you to question it. Islam tells you again and again, question the religion, question what you believe, until you have no more questions left. Islam teaches us that the best way to learn is to ask questions. And then Allah Azza wa Jalla said it's wajib on you to learn. So Islam wants us to ask questions. Now what do you do if you want to take Islam away from somebody? You have them questions, you give them the questions, but you make those answers super difficult to find. And we spoke about this yesterday, right? Where there's so much knowledge in front of us, there's so much that we can access that all of a sudden it's really difficult to find the important bits. It's just another form of distracting people. It's like a magician doing a card trick. They'll be doing one thing with one hand and another with the other hand. Why? Whatever's going on in this hand, whatever's going on in front of you, that's just a distraction. What they really want to hide from you is the actual trick, the way they do it. When we say a magician does magic, I'm talking like a card trick, for instance. The majority of card tricks, all they are is distracting whoever's in front of you, distracting the person who's being tricked, so that you can do something without them noticing. And all these distractions, they play on us, they play on our mind, and they make it more and more difficult for us to really care about Islam, for us to really care about our religion. I mean, why would you when you've got so much else to care about, so much else to think about? All of a sudden, Islam starts to fall down the pecking order, your religion starts to fall down the list of priorities, the list of things you care about, the list of things that matter. And you notice it. When it's the Champions League quarter-final, when it's time for Maghrib, you think, you know what? There's 10 minutes left, let me just watch and then I'll pray. Allah can wait. Who knows what might happen here? See, here's the thing. Islam should never be falling down that priority list, but the more distractions you have, the more things you have to put on that list of priorities, the more chance that you're going to start picking things over Islam. So we have all these different distractions that are there to pull Islam away from us, pull our religion away from us. And I'm not saying that religion is haram, or that it's there to pull, that football's haram, or that's there to pull you away from your religion. Far be it. But we have all these different things, and today we're talking about socials. All the different apps that we use, all the different things that we use, that we spend our time on, and we spoke about this yesterday as well, that we use them so much more than we think. If you were to check your screen time right now, especially for those of you guys who are on holiday from school, if you check your screen time right now, you're looking at maybe 3, 4, 5 hours on Insta. It doesn't feel like you spent 4 or 5 hours just scrolling through your feed. TikTok will probably be even more than that. But you don't realize it. You're distracted. And we're going to focus on three main risks, three main dangers, but specifically dangers to Islam, or dangers to our Islam, individually. And what you'll notice with these is, not only is it a danger to our soul, a danger to us Islamically, but also you'll realize those dangers translate into the real world as well. You'll realize they'll translate into real world effects as well. The first of the dangers is what? Hasad, jealousy. With the rise of Instagram, we've seen a rise in jealousy, a rise in feelings of envy, of competitiveness. Now, there's two types of competitiveness. One is the really good type, which is like sporting competitiveness. You know, you want to win, you want to be the best. That's good. You work for it. You work hard for it. You get to the top. You become the best. That's good. The other type is, why does he have that and I don't? Not where you want to work for it, but you think, I don't want him to have that envy, that hasad. And we have to realize it's not a joke, this hasad. It's not something that we can take lightly. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Falaq, which we all know very well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I seek protection from the Lord of Falaq, from the Lord of everything. The Lord of the high and mighty, the Lord of the low, the Lord of the vast, the Lord of the small. I seek protection from Allah Azza wa Jal. And He tells us the different things to seek protection from. But notice that very first word, qul. That means it's an instruction. Say, Allah Azza wa Jal is telling you, seek protection from these things. And what's the last ayah of Surah Falaq? وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And from the evils of who? The hasideen. Hasidin means the hasideen, the people who have jealousy within them. مِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. The people who have jealousy within them, who act on that jealousy. See, now jealousy, it can take different forms. But why has Allah Azza wa Jal said it like this? First we look at the Qur'an, at the start of the surah. Allah Azza wa Jal is telling you, this is something you should be afraid of. Look towards Allah for protection from what? From other people's jealousy. The second thing is, what is this hasidin idha hasad? See, the Qur'an, when we listen to it, it sounds attractive to listen to. It sounds melodious. There's a certain melody to it. There's a certain tune to it. It tends to rhyme. But Allah Azza wa Jal has not written the Qur'an in the way He has written it so that it is melodious, so that it rhymes. The Qur'an is one of the best pieces of poetry ever written, or in fact the best piece of poetry ever written. But the Qur'an was not written to be poetry. It was written as a message. Every word in the Qur'an has meaning. Every word in the Qur'an is there for a reason. Allah Azza wa Jal didn't simply write it as وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ so that it rhymes and it fits the pattern of Surah Falaq. No. Allah Azza wa Jal is telling us, jealousy is there. Jealousy will always be there. But some people will act on that jealousy. In fact, we have a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Where he says, كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمْ حَسُودٌ. What does that mean? كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمْ. Every single person. Bani Adam is who? Everybody. Each and every person comes from Hazrat Adam. كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمْ. Every single person. كُلُّ آدَمْ what? كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمْ what? حَسُودٌ. Every single person has jealousy inside them. Every single person. Now, jealousy in and of itself as a trait, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. There's types of jealousy. We spoke about that competitiveness, that I want to be the best. That's a good thing. If you're working towards being the best because you want to be the best, that's a good type of jealousy. A sense of protective jealousy, haya in relationships and things like that. That's a good type of jealousy, within reason, within moderation, so long as you don't take it too far. That's a good type of jealousy. But then you have the types of jealousy which cause you destruction, which cause you harm, which cause you evil. And the Prophet goes on and he says, in fact, he said that jealousy doesn't harm a person if he doesn't act or speak on it. Jealousy won't harm you unless you act or speak on that jealousy. If you act on that jealousy, there's different ways of acting on that jealousy. Somebody could be preying on your downfall because they're jealous of you. That, in and of itself, you can understand why that's harmful, why that's dangerous. Somebody praying for something bad to happen to you. The other thing is to speak on your jealousy. What does the Prophet mean by that? What does it mean to speak on our jealousy? And to speak on your jealousy takes on two forms. One is when somebody has some good news. I don't know, for instance, results day is coming up. I think A-level results day is maybe a week after next, and then the week after that you've got GCSE results day. your mate gets really good grades, yeah? Your mate's got amazing grades, and in your head you're thinking, I don't know how he got those grades, he doesn't deserve that. A little jealousy inside you. Why did he get such good grades? That's not good jealousy. Keep it inside you, keep it internalized. It's not good to have it regardless, but keep it within you and it's not doing any harm to anybody. But as soon as you speak on it, there's two ways of speaking on it. Either that person who got the really good grades, that person with the really great news, you try and put them down. You're not congratulating them, you're trying to put them down. You're trying to, like I say, they're trying to humble them. There's a thing to notice here as well, there's a little caveat. With our mates, we make jokes a lot of the time. So for instance, if somebody graduates and you say, how'd they let you graduate, as a joke, in your heart you're happy for them, but you make a little joke, that's fine, fair. I'm not saying everybody who makes a joke like that is jealous of you, but I make jokes like that a lot. I'm not saying everyone who makes jokes like that is jealous of you, but then there will be people who deliberately try and put you down. They'll tell you to stay in your lane, stay in your place. They'll try and remind you of all the terrible things that could happen as well. They'll try and remind you of why what you did that was great isn't actually that great. That's one way of speaking on it. You're putting a damper on somebody else's happiness. So of course that's going to do harm to them. And in the ayah that we started off with, the ayah of Surah An'am, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَإِن يُهْلِكُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ. They ruin none but themselves. But they fail to realize it, they fail to perceive it. When we do these things, harming other people, it has an impact on us as well. It harms us more than anyone. We see it in the AlQuaim, ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي. All these things I've done, I've harmed myself. And the realization that it's myself that I'm harming the most is one of the most important realizations we can have, because that's what drives us away from these sins. But then there's another type of speaking on jealousy. One is where you actually discourage someone. You try and put a damper on their happiness or their success or whatnot. The second is ghibah. When you start speaking to other people, expressing your jealousy about somebody else. And we all know the harm and the damage that ghibah does to a person's soul. I won't go too much into depth about that, but backbiting, we know for a fact, that's haram. Backbiting, it's been repeated again and again, how dangerous it is and how bad it is, both for the person who is backbiting and the person who's being backbitten about. Recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So that's the first risk that I'm going to mention towards your religion. The second one I'm going to mention is your hijab. Hijab is seriously at risk on socials. Let's start off with girls. So the girls behind the curtain. It's already difficult to wear a scarf and be such a prominent symbol of Islam. No one's saying it's easy. It's a struggle. It's a jihad in and of itself. Cool. But at the same time, why would we want to make it harder? Why would we want to make it more difficult? Especially for those girls who are in school and they see kind of girls around them who don't wear hijab, and everybody thinks of those girls as the pretty girls. Everybody thinks those girls are the beautiful girls. You deal with that in school and whatnot, and you can kind of convince yourself, you know what, yeah, I'm still beautiful, I'm still pretty, whatnot. I wear my hijab, but it doesn't detract from my beauty. But you go online, you go on Insta, and you see all these girls who are showing everything off, and they're getting 1,000 likes, but you're only getting 100. You notice that, and you might tell yourself it doesn't have an impact, it doesn't have an effect, it doesn't make any changes to you, it doesn't make a difference to you, but somewhere deep down, it does. That little twang, that little thought, that is there. And it goes on, you have this thought, you know what, I'll post a photo without my hijab. My Insta's private, no one's going to see it really. I've only got girls on my Insta, no one will see it. I'll post a photo without my hijab. Fire, that's not a problem. But at the same time, if that same photo gets out, who's going to be accountable for it? If that same photo spreads, who then is going to be accountable for it? It's the same kind of thought that, for the girls, if you're out with your mates, let's say, even if you're just out at one of your friends' houses, there's only girls there. So you take off your hijab, cool, that's not a problem. Would you be okay with somebody putting you on their story? Somebody taking a quick boomerang, a quick video. You're normally wearing hijab. In this moment, you're not. Somebody's posted that on their story. Now everybody's seen you with that hijab. If you wouldn't be all right with that, why are you all right with risking putting it on your post, putting it on your Insta feed, where you've got no control over who's seeing what? At least on Snap, when someone screenshots it, you can see it. When you post on Insta, nobody really knows. And the second point on the hijab is that for some reason we seem to have lost sight of how important it is. these debates on Twitter, we're going to talk quite a lot tomorrow, inshallah, about these different kind of debates on Twitter and this Twitter tabligh, not tomorrow, in fact the day after tomorrow. But I see again and again people talking about how hijab isn't wajib. Why is this a debate on Twitter? Hijab is instructed, clear as day in the Quran, you have to cover yourself. There's no debate about it. Nobody's saying it's easy. Nobody's saying that it's simple to wear the hijab, that there's no struggling with it. There is. And at the same time, I'm not denying that hijab and those who wear the hijab and those who don't wear the hijab, they're vilified more than anybody else. I'm struggling to think of any other kind of sin or any other kind of mistake or any other kind of transgression where people will have as much to say on it as they do about hijab. It becomes a center limelight for Islam because it's a symbol of your religion. So when you do or don't wear the hijab, people will scrutinize you, people will criticize you. That's true. That's a fact. If you don't wear the hijab, people will come at you for not wearing the hijab. If you do wear the hijab, people will come at you for the way you behave when you wear the hijab. People will come at you no matter what, regardless. But why are people arguing whether it's halal or haram, whether it's wajib or not? Well, it's wajib. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He said clear as day in the Quran, in Surah Ahzab, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yudnina alayhinna min jalabihinna. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He's saying here in Surah Ahzab, verse 59, when you leave your house, cover yourself. Wear something over what you're wearing already. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He's telling you to cover yourselves. He says again and again in the Quran. And the other side of hijab that we seem to be losing online is our modesty. Hijab is not just about the photos that you put out there. It's not just about what you're wearing. It's about how you act as well, your mannerisms, the way you behave. I'm seeing people post things, I see it all the time on Twitter, people post things like, oh, if I wasn't a hijabi, then it would be over for you all. Well, what do you mean? If you weren't a hijab, it's like the same thing as you see on Twitter, people post like, oh, I'm making moves, but in silence. You know, I'm making moves, but they're in silence. But go make your moves, nobody cares. Why are you telling us? It's the same thing with your hijab. Oh, if I didn't wear a hijab, do you know how great I'd be looking? Well, you're wearing your hijab for a reason. You're wearing your hijab to conceal that from the rest of the world. Why are you coming here and telling us all about it? Aside from the fact that you don't look very clever when you're doing that, you're losing that modesty that is meant to come with the hijab. It's not just about what you're wearing, it's about what you're how you're behaving as well, your mannerisms. And I'll give you proof that hijab is just as much about your mannerisms as it is about what you're wearing. And this is the point where I'm going to get all the boys to listen up, because you know how I said in Surah Ahzab, it talks about girls wearing hijab, about covering themselves up? Before there's a single verse about girls wearing hijab in the Quran, in Surah Nur it tells the boys to mask your hijab as well. In Surah Nur, before there's a single verse about girls and their hijab, it tells the guys to protect their hijab as well. What does it say in Surah Nur? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, tell the believing men to lower their gaze and guard their chastity. Tell the believing men in this verse about hijab, the first thing Allah Azza wa Jal says is to lower your gaze. The first thing isn't to cover up. The first thing is look at where you're looking. The first thing is be wary of what you're watching. The first thing is be wary of how you're behaving. Lower your gaze. When you see a girl walking past, don't start staring at her, don't start leering at her. And this is addressed to men. This ayah, believing men. Oh, that's the only caveat here, the believing men. If you consider yourself to be a believing man, lowering your gaze on you now is wajib. The Quran says it here clear as day. To behave in a way that is modest is now wajib upon you. And you have to remember that. You have to maintain that. Hijab is about how you act just as much as what you wear. That applies to women and to men. But then it goes on and it says to lower their gaze and guard their chastity. Now, when Allah says to guard your chastity, there's a sense that it's ambiguous. But I'd say no, it's not ambiguous, it's broad. There's a difference. See, ambiguous is where you don't know what it could mean. Broad means it means all those things you think it could mean. So when Allah says to guard your chastity, or according to the different tafsir, Ibn Kathir says guard your chastity, other tafsir they say to guard your private parts, cover your private parts. When Allah says this, what He means here is all of those desires that come from lust, all of those actions that are a result of lust, guard yourself against those. Where they are haram, stay away from them. Allah Azza wa Jalla is instructing you here. And there's also the very literal sense, cover up. I see you guys posting your topless photos and things like that, brother. Your hijab applies online as well. See, for some reason, guys are a lot more relaxed about their hijab than girls. For the majority of the case. You have to make sure you cover up. And the same applies to what we spoke about with how girls tweet about their hijab and how they look and whatnot. Same applies to you guys as well. Have some modesty in how you act online. I see some of you guys online, your work rate, amazing, inshallah, mashallah, it's incredible. I see you commenting on every girl's photo, I see you replying to every girl's tweet. Oh, have a bit of shame, have a bit of hayat. Look at what you're doing in front of everybody as well. At least some of you have the sharm hayat to take it to the DMs, but even there, it's not halal. Allah's watching you there as well. You have to be careful what you do online in every aspect of it, in every facet of it. If you don't want to be seen on Slough High Street with a girl, why do you want to be seen on the timeline with a girl? It's the same kind of thing. Don't forget, what happens online has an impact offline. What happens online, Allah's going to ask you about that as well. They're not separate to each other. Online, it might be an escape from reality. It's not an escape from Allah Azza wa Jal. وَلَا يُمْكِنُ الْفِرَارُ مِنْ حُكُومَتِكَ. You cannot escape from Allah Azza wa Jal's reign. You cannot escape from Allah Azza wa Jal. He sees everything, He hears everything, He knows everything. For some odd reason, this new digital world, our socials, they've given us this impression that all of a sudden what happens online, it doesn't count in real life. It does. More than you know, more than you realize. There's a blur now between online and offline. You know, you see people tweet things like, they don't want that Twitter's for my mutuals, I don't want people in real life to see this. Or you think they're not going to see it? You think the people you know in real life aren't going to see your Twitter? They're not going to see your Insta? They're not going to see your TikTok? Of course they are. Of course they will. You can't hide from real life online. Same way you can't hide from Allah Azza wa Jal. We have to make sure we guard our hijab, we guard our modesty. And this leads on quite well to the final point. The interactions we have online. I'm going to focus on two interactions here. One, the interaction that we have with friends online. We have our friends who we see in real life. I'm not going to focus on that. Making new friends online. It's going to be a touchy subject because a lot of you guys will have mutuals online, people who you've met online, you've become really good friends with, really close friends with. That's fine. But don't forget, there's certain guidelines in Islam for who you're friends with as well. You know, when you tell your parents that, or in fact, I'm certain most of you won't tell your parents. If you've got a mate and you met them on Twitter, and you're going to meet them, whatever, and your parents ask you, oh, who are you going to meet? Oh, I'm going to meet a boss. Oh, who's a boss? I've not heard of him before. I'm certain 90% of you aren't going to turn around and go, oh yeah, I met him on Twitter. Your parents will be like, what do you mean you met this guy on Twitter and now you're going to meet him? What do you mean you're going to meet someone you met online? It's a mutual. Parents don't get what mutuals are. There's a reason why they're skeptical of that. It's, you know, whoever it is you meet, your mutuals, you could become really good friends with them, you could become really close with them. But don't forget, you don't really know that person yet. You don't really know who they are. And in fact, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he tells us that you cannot judge somebody as a friend until you've seen their reaction in three situations, three circumstances. What are they? The first is in a difficult time, in a difficult period of your life. The second is in your absence, behind your back. And the third is after your death. Imam Ali alayhi salam is telling you, you cannot consider somebody to be a true friend until you've seen how they react after you've died. And you're here telling someone on Twitter your darkest secrets, your deepest secrets, somebody you've never met in your life. Look, Allah Azza wa Jalla, and we speak about this all the time, how important it is to share, how important it is to talk. I've said it from here in AlQuaim, from this member. It is important. When things weigh heavy on your heart, it's important to talk. Allah Azza wa Jalla has sent you friends. He sent you people in real life. He sent you your family. He sent you your community. He sent you your friends in real life. Trust them before you turn to people you don't actually know. Trust them before you turn to people who you cannot be sure of. Because you know what? Online, here's the thing. Every message that somebody sends online, they've thought about it before they sent it. If it didn't sound right as they were typing it, they stopped typing, they went back, they retyped. It's not an immediate reaction. You don't know the insides of how that person's mind thinks. You don't know them yet. I'm not saying don't be friends with people online. I'm not saying don't be friendly. But again, remember what they teach about stranger danger. But I'm not saying don't speak to anyone online. If somebody's a genuinely good person, they're a genuinely good person. But get to know them properly before you start telling them the deepest secrets. Allah Azza wa Jalla is Sattar al-Ayyub. He's the one who hides our mistakes. He hides that which is bad within us. the only person who you can completely openly share with is Allah Azza wa Jalla. I say only person, now Allah. The only place where you can completely share is when you're in the presence of Allah Azza wa Jalla. The rest of you will have felt this, especially those of you who are a little bit older. When you've shared something that's very personal to you, almost immediately you have sort of pang of questioning. You question yourself, why did I share that? Why did I say that? Should I have shared that? Should I have said that? That immediate thought is because within you, deep down, you know I probably shouldn't have said that. This is the first thing, your interaction with new people online. I'm not saying don't meet new people online. I'm not saying don't be friends with people online. I'm not saying don't be friendly. Just make sure you get to know them properly. Make sure you know who you're talking to when you're talking. Make sure you've got a true connection with that person before you start sharing things with them that you wouldn't share with people in your real life. And the final point, and this is the final point I'll mention before I move on to my side, is your interaction with the opposite gender. It's important that we remember that being online has made it super easy for you guys to chat to some girls and for the girls at the back to chat to guys. And I'm pointing out all these young guys in front of me, that's not just limited to you. The older you get, the more you want to do. It's so easy to talk to girls for you guys and for the girls at the back to talk to guys. To talk to people of the opposite gender, it's so much easier now all of a sudden. But you've got to be careful about it. You've got to be very careful about the interactions you have. And there will be times where you do need to interact with people of the opposite gender. For instance, when you're at work, you will have colleagues who are girls, women, or at school, if you go to a mixed school or once you're in sixth form, I'm fairly certain every sixth form is mixed. You'll have girls who are in your class, you've got to do group work with them, you've got to do project work with them. I'm not saying like every time a girl is there to say hello, you have to, no, move away, no. I'm not saying that. Hold on. Sometimes you have to say hello, sometimes you have to speak to a girl. You have to interact with a girl one way or another. But think about the reason you're interacting. And I think this is the best advice on guarding our interactions with the opposite gender. What's the purpose of your interaction? What's the reason for you talking to that girl? If you can look at your purpose and say, you know what, that's a good purpose. If you can look at your purpose and say, you know what, that's justified, that's okay. When Allah asks me on the Day of Judgment, why did you do this? I've got my answer. This is the reason. Have purpose, and that's not just for talking to girls or talking to guys for girls or that. That's not just for interacting, that's for everything you do. If you know why you're doing it, if you have a purpose, then you're one step closer to analyze, is this good or is this bad? Can I do it, can I not? When you bear that in mind, you'll see yourself moving away from sins automatically. Bear in mind that purpose. And once you've got the purpose, just make sure your means matches up. Make sure how you achieve that purpose matches up. So for instance, if you arrive at work and one of your colleagues says hello, or if you're in school and one of your classmates says hello, guys, it's all right to say hello back. Or if you're doing classwork, you've got a project to do. You're doing that project with this girl, that's fine. You need to talk to her for the project, that's fine. You don't need to kiss her. You don't need to hug her. You have to remember, if it doesn't match your purpose, you don't need to do it. If your purpose isn't correct, you shouldn't be doing it anyway. Bear these two things in mind. A, why am I doing it? B, is what I'm doing matching why I'm doing it? If those things match up and you can reconcile that Islamically, Bismillah. After all, we are responsible for our own actions. Allah's not going to ask me why you guys did what you did. Allah's not going to ask you why I did what I did. Each and every one of us has to know why we did what we did, and we have to be able to say, look, Allah Azza wa Jal, I took my precautions, I did the best that I could. Because we will be asked on the Day of Judgment. And if your purpose and your manner is halal, then that's fine. You can focus on it, you can do it, you can get on with it. And the last, the very, very final risk that we will discuss, but we're going to discuss this one tomorrow, because it's a big one. Not tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. This is what I've called Twitter tabligh. And we touched on it in the first day or the second day. There's massive, massive impact on what you say online, What you say online reaches far and wide, and it's great if you want to use that platform, use your Twitter or whatnot, to try and spread Islam. It's great if you want to do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar through it. They're watching on YouTube. But you have to be very careful. And the risks involved with that are what we're going to look at, inshallah, in 2 days' time. Recite Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. We're looking at all these risks that are involved with everything we do. We're looking at how it changes. We're looking at how the world around us has developed. And that's our topic of discussion. And the reason that we have this chance to sit here and gather, the reason that we have the chance to come together and learn and to think about life and to think about Islam and how it all matches up, or in some instances doesn't, is because of the sacrifice of Imam Hussein, because of the sacrifice that our Imam made. And it wasn't something that just happened to him. It wasn't something that just occurred out of nowhere. It's not like Imam Hussein found himself trapped in the desert of Karbala and all of a sudden this army's attacking him. No, he knew what was going on. He knew what was to happen. He knew what was coming. Imam Hussein, from the very first moment when he was called to the palace of Marwan, he knew how this all ends. He knew where this all leads. He knew what was to happen. We spoke before about Imam Hussein setting off from Medina. We spoke about how he bid farewell to his mother, how he bid farewell to his grandfather. We spoke about how he helped Sayyidah Zainab up into the carriage. We spoke about how he took Hazrat al-Yasir away from Fatima Sughra. As Imam Hussein sets off on his journey, there's a few times in that journey where Imam Hussein stops. The first time is where Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, the husband of Bibi Zainab, comes to Imam Hussein. He stayed in Medina. Hazrat Abdullah is not very well. He stayed in Medina with his two sons, Hazrat Aun and Muhammad. Hazrat Aun and Muhammad did not travel with Imam Hussein towards Karbala. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, he chased after the Imam and he chased after everybody with his two sons. He handed over his two sons. That's where Imam Hussein stops the first time. Imam Hussein stops, takes the two sons of Hazrat Abdullah, and he carries on his journey. He goes towards Mecca. He stops in Mecca, but even in the sanctuary of Allah Azza wa Jalla, the Muslims didn't let Imam Hussein stay peacefully. So Imam Hussein leaves Mecca, he has to leave. And now, in the desert, the second time Imam Hussein finds himself stopping, is that moment where Imam Hussein through the journey, he calls the wife of Hazrat Muslim ibn Aqil. He tells her, bring me Ruqayya, the daughter of Hazrat Muslim ibn Aqil. He takes Bibi Ruqayya, he holds her to his chest. He looks down at this young girl and he says, Ruqayya, from now on, don't think of me as your uncle and I won't think of you as my niece. Ruqayya, from this moment on, think of me as your dad. I will think of you as my daughter. It was the moment Hazrat Muslim ibn Aqil was killed that Imam Hussein stopped for the second time. He calls the daughter of Hazrat Muslim ibn Aqil to him. He takes care of her, he holds her. The third time Imam Hussein stops, as he's travelling through the desert, is when he's surrounded by the army of Hur. What happens there? Imam Hussein stops the caravan. Hur has stopped them now. All of a sudden, Imam Hussein, what does he see? He sees Hazrat Hur's soldiers, they're standing there. But none of them are standing still. They're jogging about on the spots. He asked them why. They say the sand of this desert is so hot that they can't stay stood. Imam Hussein sees the horses are doing the same thing. What does he do? He tells Abu Fadl Abbas, go. Give water to the soldiers. Give water to the horses. Imagine that Imam who gives water even to the horses of his enemies. Not too long later in Karbala, where Sakina is crying out for water, but nobody will bring it. Asghar is crying for the water, but nobody will bring it. Imam Hussein stood there, thirsty himself, as Ali Akbar comes to him and says, if I could just have one drop of water. This was the third time Imam Hussein stopped in the desert. The fourth time Imam Hussein stops is when he is travelling. All of a sudden, Zuljana himself stops. Zuljana, the horse of Imam Hussein, refuses to move forward any further. Imam Hussein, he has been riding Zuljana since Zuljana was a pony. Zuljana has had the Imam on his back since the Imam was only a young child. Imam Hussein if he was in battle and he wanted to go towards the left, Zuljana would fly towards the left. If he wanted to go to the right, Zuljana would go towards the right. If Imam Hussein wanted to retreat, Zuljana would retreat. If he wanted to attack, Zuljana would attack. Everything Imam Hussein does, Zuljana wants to do. Everything Imam Hussein wants to do, Zuljana does. So why now all of a sudden has Zuljana stopped? Why now does he refuse to move forward? There are only two times in the history books you'll see where Zuljana refused to do what Imam Hussein tells him. One was here in this moment. The second was on the 10th of Muharram. Imam Hussein, he's atop Zuljanah. Zuljanah refuses to move forward. What does Imam Hussein say? He whispers in his horse's ear. He says, Zuljanah, believe me, I know how tired you are. Zuljanah, I know the pain you're going through. From the afternoon till now, from the morning till now, you have constantly taken me to the battlefield and then brought me and one other body back every single time. But Zuljanah, I promise you this much. Take me out to the battlefield this time. You won't have anybody to bring. Even Hussein won't come back on your back. Zuljanah, one last journey. What does Zuljanah do? Zuljanah looks towards its rear legs. What does Imam Hussein see? He sees baby Sakina wrapped around the legs of Zuljanah crying. She says, Zuljanah, I've been watching every single person who went to the battlefield, every single person who left. None of them came back except my father had to drag them back. Zuljanah, if you take Hussein, who will bring my dad back to me? Who will bring Hussein back to Sakina? Zuljanah, if you go to the battlefield now, know it will be you who made Sakina an orphan. There, Zuljanah refused to do what Imam Hussein said to him to do. But hey, on the 2nd of Muharram, Zuljanah refuses to move forward now. Mawla Hussein doesn't whisper anything in Zuljanah's ear. Mawla Hussein doesn't try and push Zuljanah forward. Instead, what does he do? He gets off of Zuljanah. He calls Abu al-Fadl Abbas. He says, Abbas, come forward, bring your horse. Imam Hussein mounts the horse of Abu al-Fadl Abbas. Imam Hussein tries to move forward. The horse of Abu al-Fadl Abbas will not move forward. Imam Hussein dismounts. He calls Hazrat Ali Akbar. He says, Akbar, bring your horse. He mounts the horse of Hazrat Ali Akbar. He tries to move forward. The horse of Ali Akbar will not move forward. It's narrated that 7 times Imam Hussein tried a different horse. Not once would any of the horses move forward in that land. Imam Hussein gets off the horse for one final time. He turns to Abu al-Fadl Abbas. He says, Abbas, look in the distance, there are some people. I can see some houses. Go and call them. Tell them I wish to speak to them. Imam Hussein alayhi salam waits as Abu al-Fadl Abbas goes to those people. The people come round and they gather. Hussein ibn Ali has come from Medina. He wishes to speak to the tribe of Bani Asad. The tribe of Bani Asad have gathered around Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Hussein asks them, tell me, what is the name of this land? This place we are at, what is it called? Somebody said to him, this is a place known as Nainava. Imam Hussein said, no, there must be another name. A man steps forward, he says, this place is known as Maria. Imam Hussein says, no, is there another name? Another man steps forward, he says, this name is known as Ghazaria. Again, they keep bringing names to Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein says, no, is there another name? Is there another name? Until the point where they say, Ya Imam, Ya Mawla, there are no other names, we have told you. Every name we've heard for this land, every name there is for this land, everything this land is known as, we've told you. But Imam Hussein says, no, there must be another name. Imam Hussein asks them, tell me, is there anybody amongst you who might know of another name? They say, look, back in the village, there is an old man. He's the oldest among us. If anybody knows of any old names, it would be him. Imam Hussein says, go, bring him. When they bring this old man, the man himself cannot walk. He's very frail. He's very fragile. So they seat him on a chair and bring the seat to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The man sits in front of our Imam. He says to the Imam, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. He wishes his salams on the Imam. He recognizes our Imam. And then Imam Hussein asks him the same question. Tell me, I've been told all of these names for this land. Is there another name that I have not yet been told? Is there another name that I have not yet been informed of? The man stops and thinks for a moment, then he looks at Imam Hussein and he says, I've heard from my fathers and their fathers before them that this land at one time was known as Karbala. As Imam Hussein hears this, he turns, he looks up towards the skies and he calls out to Allah Azza wa Jal. He calls out, Ya Allah, A'udhu Billah, Min Karb wa Bala. I call out to Allah Azza wa Jal for protection from trials and pains. He turns to the man, he thanks him. He says, this is exactly the land I was looking for. He turns to Abu al-Fadl Abbas. He says, Abbas, pitch your tents. Abbas, get ready. This is the place we will stop. This is the place we will stay. He turns to the man, the Banu Asad, the tribe, and he says to them, look, this land, it belongs to you. Tell me, how much is the land worth? The man, he says to Imam Hussein, he says, Ya Imam, Ya Mawla, why do you wish to know? Imam Hussein says, I wish to stay in this land. First, the man says, Mawla, please, forgive me. I would not reject anything you say, I would not refuse anything you say, but I have been told before that no prophet and no successor has ever been able to live in this land without their blood spilling in one way. Be it Adam or Noah or Ibrahim, no man has come across this land where he was a prophet that his blood didn't spill. Mawla, I don't want your blood to spill on this land of Karbala. When the prophets before him came to this land, one would stub his toe, one would cut his foot on a rock, but when Hussein came to this land, there was not 1 or 2 drops of blood that fell. When Zainab goes to see Imam Hussein's body, what does she say? Anta al-akhi, are you my Hussein? Are you my brother? Hussein's body had been attacked so much, his blood had been spilled so much that the Furat itself had turned red, that on that day of Ashura, the skies rained blood. But Imam Hussein says, no, this is the place I must stay. This is the place that I have promised Rasulullah I will come to. Imam Hussein says to the man, so tell me, what is the value of this land? How much is it worth? They say, Ya Imam, Ya Mawla, this land, if you wish to stay here, we will not charge you. Stay here as our guest. Be our guest when you come here. Imam Hussein says, no, a guest comes and then he leaves. But when I come to this land, when my brothers and my children have come to this land, we have not come here with the intention of leaving. From now until the dawn of Qiyamah, Hussein's body will lie in Karbala. From now until the day of Qiyamah, Abbas will lie by the river Furat. We have not come here as guests who will come and leave. We have come here to stay now. The man, he tells Imam Hussein alayhi salam the value of the land of Karbala. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he takes out a small purse. In it there are some gold coins. He gives the man 3 times the value of the land. And then he says what? He says, I have bought this land from you. I have taken this land from you, and now I wish to gift it back to you. Now I wish to give you this land back. This is my gift to you. But in return for this gift, I have just one request. In return for this gift, there's just one thing that I have to ask of you. In this moment, our Imam could have remembered anybody. He could have remembered Abbas, he could have remembered Akbar, he could have remembered Qasim, he could have remembered Asghar. But in that moment, the man that is listening to Imam Hussein, the tribe of Banu Asad, what do they hear? Imam Hussein looks at them and he says, there will come a time where my Shia, my followers, will come to my grave. My followers will come to see my grave. When they arrive at my grave, make sure you take care of them. Make sure you give them something to eat. Make sure you give them something to drink. Ya Imam, us followers, it is us who you remembered in that moment, with all our sins and all our mistakes. Hussein ibn Ali, in the worst moments of his life, in the most difficult moments of his life, he called out upon you. And if I were to pinpoint any one moment more difficult than that, I would look to when he had Hazrat Ali Asghar's body in his arms. He is going back and forth from the tent of Bibi Rabab. He calls out, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Imam Hussein does not know how to tell Bibi Rabab, your Asghar, your 6-month-old was killed thirsty. In that moment, who does our Imam remember? Again he turns to the skies. He looks towards Medina. He calls out, Ya Rasulullah, if only my Shia could see me in this moment. If only my followers could see me right now. Think about what you do. Think about every action you take when you realize Imam Hussein in these moments remembered me and you. Imam Hussein says to Banu Asad, look, when my Shia come, when my followers come to my grave, give them something to eat and give them something to drink. And then he says, I have one other request. He says to the men, he says, look, after 8 days, you will see a battle ensue. Once the battle is over, our bodies will be lying on the sands of Karbala. We will be there without any kafan. There will be nobody to give the son of Zahra ghusl. There will be nobody to look after the body of Abbas. There will be nobody to gather the pieces of Qasim's body. When that time comes, come over to where our bodies lay. Bury us in the ground. It is the right of every Muslim to be buried. It is wajib on every Muslim to bury a Muslim where he comes across his body. But oh Hussein, my Mawla lay there in the plains of Karbala, on the sands of Karbala. Nobody to bury Abu Abdullah. He has already spoken